Hey everybody, welcome back to this very off-the-cuff episode of Drew the Catholic. Yeah, sometimes, I'm glad I have this set up because I see things and I'm like, I want to talk about this immediately. And yeah, I'm sorry, the thumbnail is very clickbaity, but it's kind of true. You'll see what I'm talking about. So this article, it's in the description below, and there's two links actually. There's a Catholic news agency article that I found and then a study that it references. And I just want to talk about it here really quickly. Brother Andrew, it's not what you think. This is a live stream. Yeah. Yes. I'm responding to your comment in real time. I don't do this that often, but let's just dive right into it. So, as you'll see, we're going to go through this study a little bit. The Catholic Project, which is an organization that's doing all sorts of studies and research on Catholicism in the United States, they did a study on the priesthood, polarization, generational dynamics, and the ongoing impact of the abuse crisis. Further insights from the National Study of Catholic Priests. Now, I know that a big part of this is this last part here. I'm not really going to focus on that today, but this part, generational dynamics. A lot of cool stuff here. So Catholic News Agency posted this, and basically this found that regarding priestly ideology, that there's an increasing perception of more theologically conservative or orthodox young priests as compared with their older counterparts. There's no question that today there is some tension in the church. There's some stuff that goes on. You can look at my recent live streams or just the Catholic YouTube sphere in general surrounding the synod and synodality. There's a lot of concern about the direction of the church in multiple directions, depending on who you ask, right? But one thing is clear when you look at the demographics of the priests, the people who are leading our parishes, it is going one way. So let's dive right into this study. You can go check this out yourself. Like I said, it's really good. I read through most of it before starting this, but again, I don't want to go through all of it. You can read it for yourself. But right here on page 3, this figure blew my mind. So what this is showing how priests are rating themselves in terms of theological orthodoxy by ordination year. So priests who were ordained before 1960, self-rating, look at this. The dark blue is very progressive and the dark red is very conservative. And then the sort of light blue is middle of the road. That's this color here. And again, this is their self-rating as the years go on. So right over here, if they were ordained before 1960, and right over here, 2020 or later. What do you notice about these colors? It's really only going one way. And to remind you, this figure, at least this figure, is about their theological orthodoxy. So we're not talking politics just yet, okay? In the 1960s, look at how big very progressive was. That's 15% of priests would self-identify as very progressive. Theologically, somewhat progressive is the majority of priests before 1960. And then look at very conservative. That's less than 10%. Now, if we come over to 2020 or later, very progressive has literally disappeared. There is not a color for someone identifying as theologically very progressive that was ordained as a priest. Pretty much. Yeah, I mean, there was a little bit in 2015 to 2019, but we have a sliver of people identifying as somewhat theologically progressive, a small chunk of middle of the road, a large majority of identifying as conservative or orthodox theologically, and then a small chunk bigger than the middle of the road chunk of very theologically orthodox or conservative. This is how priests are self-identifying, and wow. Guys, this is huge, okay? Similar figure, if you come down a little bit, this is their political orientation by the same metric, ordination year, okay? Very liberal, somewhat liberal, moderate, conservative, very conservative. Look at this. There were a lot of very liberal politically, over 10%, and then a large majority or a significant majority of somewhat liberal in the 60s. And then you come to this now, and there are very few identifying as very liberal or somewhat liberal in their politics, and almost a tie. It looks like, just as the eye sees, between conservative politically and moderate politically. This is very different, right? Like, this graph is trending that way in both instances exclusively. Okay. This is really interesting to me, and I think it says a lot about where we're going. As a church, there's one other interesting one. Well, we'll get there in a second. So this article also interviewed some priests and with ties to seminaries, and this fits their experience. What they're saying is basically, most of the young men coming to the seminary are looking to be part of the solution. They want to make themselves available for the needs of the church. This is an important note, I think. He cautioned that young men describing themselves as Orthodox do not necessarily have a preference for traditionalist practices. Rather, young men entering the seminary today are looking to become a part of something bigger than themselves. He said, preaching the gospel and serving the poor in context of the total fidelity to the church. This is an important quote right here. Nobody wants to give their life for a question mark. The ones who are coming forward are open to the idea of entering the priesthood are going to be the ones most intent on ensuring that they are Catholic and they're on board with everything. They are men who really love the Lord and the church. They believe in her. They believe that he founded her. And so there's not an instinct at all to believe anything other than what the church believes and to teach what the church teaches. I think many of them are reacting to the wreckage of secular materialism, and many of them have seen the effect that it has had on their peers. I'm kind of paraphrasing. They've seen people trapped in sin and want to make a big difference in the world. They want to be people who bring light and joy and hope to a world that seems to have lost them. If you're on the ground with younger priests, you know that this is the case. I can speak to the priests I know who are younger. I can speak to what they've said about their experience in seminary, what they've said about things on the ground. All this to say, why am I doing this stream? Well, because I think it's really interesting that in a time when maybe on the ground among the laity, there's the most concern about the future of the church. And you could say that maybe leaning more towards like a traditional perspective, or even someone just trying to be just a good Catholic, not going to describe as like rad trad or anything, just a good Catholic. There's some concern. But you look at this figure, very conservative theologically, or conservative theologically. That is 70% of new priests by this graph, ordained in 2020 or later. Somewhere in here, I had it. I should have highlighted it for myself. It actually talked about the percentage of priests total. Here it is. So in terms, in this section, it's talking about their political views. Moderate political views is still pretty big. I think that's a good thing. Conservative is much larger. That's a good balance, I would say, right? This paragraph right here, a full 85% of the youngest cohort describes itself as conservative or Orthodox, or very conservative or Orthodox theologically, with only 14%, the smallest percentage of any cohort, describing themselves as middle of the road. Theologically progressive and very progressive priests once made up 68% of new ordinands. Today, that number has dwindled to almost 0. So this is huge. This is huge. So as we're sitting here, there's all these discussions, there's all these fears about what's going on in the church, about where it's going. Is it going to go off the rails? Well, no. So if you have any concerns about the theological future of the church being anything other than Catholic, all I can say is, again, I'm just going to zoom in on it here. This is what's coming. Well, that's political. Let's go back to the theological. This is what's coming. The average parish priest, we've been dealing with the old guys for a long time. But obviously there's less priests. That's one thing to keep in mind. But as the ages go on, as the years go on, and the average age of the priest moves towards this demographic, this is going to be who's leading the church. This is going to be who's in charge of your parishes. These are going to be the future bishops, the future cardinals, for no other reason than they're the only option, frankly, by virtue of being ordained priests in Christ's church. But this is where it's going. So Is it crazy right now? Other podcasts talk about that. Other live streams I've done have talked about that. Sure, it's crazy. There are some concerning things. There's lots of things to get fired up about. Stick around though, because it's not going to be that way for long. So that's the main thing I wanted to highlight in this live stream. This is just really interesting, by the way. In addition to that, though, I did want to say, because it's headed that way, that means the concerns of tomorrow's church, the fears of tomorrow's church, the ideological battles of tomorrow's church are going to be very different than they are today. This is, well, there's some good stuff in here to read that I'm going to skip through, but this section here is, I think, where we're going to find our concerns for tomorrow. And it's nothing to be scared about, nothing crazy or drastic going on right now. But it does highlight what's, tomorrow's fight might be. Accountability to the Pope. They asked priests if they value being accountable to Pope Francis by year of ordination. And you can see anyone ordained before 1980 very much in the strongly agree and agree category. And this, to be fair, this is the majority for all cohorts. But if you look over here in the disagree, strongly disagree, and neither agree nor disagree category, it is trending in the opposite direction overall. The 1980 to 1999 category has a little bump up here, and here. But the largest growth in disagree and strongly disagree of the statement, I value being accountable to Pope Francis, is in priests ordained in 2000 or later. Here's the same question, not by year of ordination, but by age of priest. Again, majority still strongly agree or agree, but the largest percentage of people who disagree, that they value being accountable to Pope Francis or strongly disagree, is under age 45. And then there's a sliver here from 45 to 64. Notice here, though, this is interesting if you look at the strongly disagree category. The biggest jump is between these two and these two, and really between 65 to 74 and 45 to 64. Look at that jump from people who strongly disagree, that they value being accountable to the Pope. Again, this is the minority. This category and all of them is, less than 10% here, less than 10% here, right, of totals. But it is growing. So I've been saying this for a while, by the way, that the concern of the church is no longer theological liberalism. Okay. Yep. Someone's going to say in the comments, but what about the synod? What about all the craziness with the German bishops? Yeah. That's going to be here for like 2 seconds. Mark my words. It's going to be crazy for a bit. The concern of tomorrow is going to be sedevacantism and radical traditionalism, I think. We're already seeing it now. It's flaring up. And when I say radical traditionalism, let me define my terms. I don't like these terms. I'm going to be very honest. I don't like the term radical traditionalist. I don't like the term traditional Catholic. I think there are two categories proper. There's people who are Catholic in that they believe, hold to, profess, and proclaim everything that the Catholic Church teaches. And then there are people who are not that. That's it. That's the language I want to use. I don't like traditional Catholic because it implies that there's another type of Catholic that you could be. I don't like radical traditionalist because really, if you're breaching doctrine, if you're breaching and leaving faith in the magisterium, then you're not a radical traditionalist Catholic. You're just no longer Catholic. That's my opinion on that matter. I don't like that language, but the colloquial term radical traditionalist, that's going to be the fear of the future, is people who are waning in their trust of the papacy. Now, you could say this might just be this papacy, and that's fair. Even this report right here, Pope Francis is often seen as more liberal or progressive than his immediate predecessors. But that is becoming an increasing number of people who are questioning. So now, here's how that's going to get interesting. When I'm trying to find the age demographics here, right? You have all these priests. Oh my gosh, I skipped right past it. 1 second, let me find it. You have all these priests kind of controlling the hierarchy in this area over here where there's lots of blue. And they're going to hold on to this for a little while longer. And then you're going to have these priests backfilling all those positions. There's going to be tension while that transition occurs. But that tension is just going to naturally resolve, I think, honestly. This is going to be the challenge, though. As our next few popes are likely coming from these blue numbers here, what's going to be the response of these younger priests who are conservative and Orthodox? Now, again, many of them are still valuing their allegiance to the Pope. Many of them, as these priests said, are not describing themselves as traditionalists or radtrads or the sort. They just want to be faithful to, total fidelity to the church. Most of them won't be a problem. I do think, though, that the few who answered this way, who answered that they are strongly disagreeing that it's valuable to be accountable to Francis, this is going to be a very loud voice. This is going to be a voice of dissension, as it already is. In the same way that if I scroll up here, the theologically liberal priests were that minority dissenting voice of the past. So we're kind of seeing a reversal of roles here, and that's going to be very, very interesting to watch. That's pretty much all I have to say. I guess my exhortation is this. This scandal stuff of church craziness and doctrine's going to change, it's not worth really thinking about, because if you watch my last video on the synod, on synodality, nothing happened. So I'm not worried about it changing church dogmatics, because literally to be Catholic is to believe that can't happen, frankly. So I'm not worried about that. And if you're worried about the demographics of the church trending in a progressive direction, then worry no more. I will say this, though, for people who are faithful to the magisterium, the internal struggle of the church of tomorrow is likely with people who are not theologically progressive, but with people who are, to use the word rigorist is probably the more proper term. And if you look through church history, you see this battle. It goes both ways. You have people who are too loose with doctrine, too loose with practice. And you could call them theologically progressive maybe in today's age. And then you have people that are what we call rigorists. And in, some of the first millennia of the church, we saw that they were the ones who didn't want to receive heretics who had been baptized. They wanted to rebaptize them. Well, we know that the church came down not on the side of rigorism when it comes to baptism. Vatican II reaffirmed some of those teachings from the early church. I think that's going to be the fight of tomorrow. Here, I'll look at a couple comments here. That's a great statistic. I'm guessing that's referencing just the direction it's heading. Trouble is the number of new priests or seminarians. That is true. That is true. Pope Benedict said that the church of tomorrow would be small but fierce. Kevin, yo. Joyous news indeed. I do get a kick out of how the church is simultaneously heading into ultra-liberalism or ultra-conservatism, depending on who you ask. Both can't be right. This is actually a really good point, because theologically, again, I really don't like these colors either, because if I were to make this graph, this is very clearly using American political colors, left and right. I would not make middle of the road blue and conservative Orthodox red. Those should be yellow and dark yellow. And then this should be maybe we're getting extreme and we're getting extreme, right? That's how I would make this graph. And then the same thing, I guess this is where the colors apply accurately, is politically. But then again, moderate, just by virtue of making it blue, you make these people seem more liberal. This should be gray, or I don't know, what's the independent color? Maybe yellow, although that's libertarian, which is, I'm not libertarian. I think that's craziness. So that is interesting. They definitely both can't be right. I agree. And what's interesting is, if you look at least the political spectrum, moderate is the one that has stayed the same. And conservative has definitely grown in terms of their political leanings, but moderate has stayed the same. And if anything, if you could say that middle of the road and conservative are, really a close middle ground to each other, and then this is where it gets extreme over here, really the middle ground has grown. And then again, according to this Father Bryce Sibley's feedback, or was it this other one, Father Carter Griffin's feedback, these people that they're seeing that are following this trend are more theologically conservative, but they're not describing themselves as like radical traditionalists. So it really doesn't seem like, if anything, the church is balancing itself. Nature is healing, right? That whole thing. What part of Vatican II played a part in older priests being more progressive? Did it play a part at all? I would say it didn't play a part at all. And here's why. Because if you actually look, the most theologically progressive priests are before 1960. Maybe 1965 to 69 actually is the most theologically progressive. But the council was happening during these parts, so I guess you could say that. But, these are priests being ordained in those years. So, no, I don't think the council could have played a role, because what you see is actually after the council, you see that number decreasing steadily. And these priests ordained during the years of the council would have had basically no role in the council. Off the top of my head, I don't remember when it was convened. 1962 through 1965. That's actually really, yeah. So, like, shortly after the council, you might have had, you had a brief spike in theologically progressive priests. But then immediately following, and like really 1970, now you're getting closer to where, like, some of the Missal Romanum for the Novus Ordo are actually being published. That took a while. You're actually seeing that number decrease. So I don't know that it had any role. If anything, and this has always been my take on this, I think that social elements are more important there. You see socially a lot of craziness going on. I guess craziness is the word I'll use for it. You see socially a lot of change, a lot of progressivism. You have the sexual revolution and all that going on. But you have in the church, the Second Vatican Council addressing things at the same time. I don't think that there's any necessary any necessary link between the two of them. Now, what you do have, and people like Father Blake Britton in his book Reclaiming Vatican II talk about this, you do have a group of people from within the church, what he calls the Paracouncil, trying to conveniently read between the lines or insert things as a part of the council that actually weren't a part of the council at all. I would say that's where a large majority of the problems with so-called the spirit of Vatican II come from. But the council itself largely was not implemented. Radical traditionalism, how Kevin grew up. Yeah. I can't wait to talk with you about this, Kevin, because I think that we might oddly have some points of convergence in our thoughts on these things. I recently reverted back, and all this stuff is way over my head, the subculture groups within the Catholic Church and the divisions within it. This is why just be Catholic. I believe everything the magisterium teaches and upholds. That's it. No more, no less. Someday they will make a movie about our lifetime called Seeds Rising. Oh, man. Interesting. Progressive priests made Vatican II happen. Vatican II didn't make progressive priests happen. That, I guess, I don't know that I would say that it was only progressive priests. Based on my knowledge, and I'm going off the cuff here, so it might not be perfect. I'm sorry, I'm like moving your comment. That's live. Everyone's seeing that. I think it was pretty universally called for, but the demographics of the time definitely were leaning that way. You need subscribers. You need to blame Vatican II for everything. COVID happened because of Vatican II. Oh man, so good. That would be a really funny video to make, like on April Fool's Day. Pope John the 23rd was a based pope. Yeah. And yeah, definitely looking forward to talking with Kevin. Just so everyone knows, we haven't set a firm date because I haven't messaged him back yet because I am really bad at that. But we're gonna have a conversation on his channel, which will be kind of cool. I'm looking forward to it. Anyways, guys, that's really all I have. I don't need to make this any longer than it already is. But go read on this, reflect on it. Again, I have this study linked in the description. I also have this article linked. It's pretty good. There's some really good quotes from priests who are connected to seminaries. I mean, just look at this headline. Progressive priests going extinct. The report says it shows a significant divide between political and theological self-identification of older priests versus younger priests. So that's kind of the whole thing in a nutshell. One of the other things I guess I'll just end on is, this is probably a good place to end. They asked priests to kind of discuss some of the reasons that they wanted to become priests, pre-2002 and post-2002 ordinations. So why do you want to become a priest pre-2002? I like the lifestyle of the priest and the recognition and respect they had. Yowza. Post-2002, this was a time that the church needed good men. Frankly, if I had to choose between a priest who said, I like the respect I get as a priest, or a priest who says the church needs good men, I'm going to pick the latter because they have a heart towards others already. So if that's how people are responding post-2002, that just shows that we're headed in a good direction. There's less focus on what the priesthood can do for you, but what you can do for the priesthood, right? To kind of play on John F. Kennedy's words there. Again, if you read this section, what you'll realize is people being ordained in the wake of the abuse crisis are realizing that they need to be good men. The church needs good men. And lastly, you will spend your entire priesthood restoring trust. So have no fear. Church of Tomorrow is in good hands. Really good hands. Really, really excellent hands on the basis of these statistics. And as I've said, on the basis of the experience of people running seminaries and my experience. If you know a young priest, maybe leave a comment, let us know. Does that live up to your experience of younger priests? I can tell you just on the basis of our parish priests, it does. And shout out to Father Matthew. I shout out my priest a lot on this channel because he's awesome. When he was installed, he read the creed and then read that part at the end where he says, I promise to uphold the teaching of the magisterium and submit to the Catholic Church, everything she does and she teaches. And when he said those words, you could tell that he meant them. And that seems to be the way things are going. Another thing I want to do just at the very end here for anyone watching, anyone that's in seminary right now, God bless you. We're praying for you. There's some seminarians I know from my diocese that I have in mind as I'm saying that I'm quasi in contact with, that maybe we'll get on the show someday. That statement at the very end there, the church needs good men. We do. We need good men. We need you to be priests. We're praying for you. We're very excited to have you as our priests, and God help us take care of them. The last thing we want to do is get a generation of really good priests and burn them out. So, a couple other comments here. See you, Kevin. You probably already left by the time I saw this, but glad you joined us for a bit. Yeah, we're headed for a revival. It's coming. The pendulum has swung so hard, it's coming back the other way. That is well said, David. And yeah, that's it, man. I think we really are. I think we're at a pivotal time in the church. It's going to be really, really fun to be Catholic. And by fun, what I mean is this. Like, if you wanted to just coast in your life and not be accountable for evangelizing the world, it's not going to be a fun time to be Catholic. But if you wanted a grand adventure, if you wanted to get to participate in the new evangelization, if you wanted to rebuild the church and actually, maybe implement Vatican II and see that come to fruition, I think we're on the cusp of it. For one, every ecumenical council takes about 100 years to implement. That's maybe that number, give or take. But if you look back, that's just how it happens. It always takes a while. We're getting closer and closer to that precedent of how long it's been before things start to kick into gear. You know, it's like taking your medicine. You take a pill. It might take a bit for it to actually go into effect. There's been a lot of change in our world, a lot of craziness. And frankly, I think our generation, our age, well, it's just like that article said, is dealing with the aftermath of secularization, dealing with this vacuum of meaning, dealing with all of that type of stuff. And we're seeing our priests, the new priests, the priests that are being ordained after 2002, according to that graph, they're the antidote. They're the antibodies. They're what God is raising up, and not just the priests, but the laity. You know, I've talked recently a lot about the apostolic call on the laity in Vatican II. If you go read the decree on the apostolate of the laity, that is for all of us to take up and to go into the world. It's going to be really good. Because here's what I'm seeing, and I guess maybe this is my last little reflection. As I have started to take my faith seriously, as I have participated in the sacraments, as I have grown, as I have seen God move in my life, I've become more effective on mission. And as I've pressed into that mission, what I've realized is this. This is going to be an interesting statement. I'll see how you guys react to it. We are entering into a time of such missionary fruitfulness that I don't even know if we know what we're entering into. Like, I don't even know if we can comprehend how fruitful it's going to be. Think about this. The generation of the council, the world, Dom talked about this when he was on my channel. They kind of thought, oh, everyone's just going to come back to faith because World War II was so horrible. There was this like optimism of like, yeah, we're going to have a council. We're going to orient ourselves to be missional towards the world. And after World War II, they're probably all ready for it. And look at technological progress and progress of peace between nations. Like, this is all going to get really good. There was this optimism. And that optimism almost backfired in that it allowed for maybe laxity. I don't know. Now we have the opposite. We have an intense, universal pessimism. If you ask a liberal, how's the country going? Pessimistic. If you ask a conservative, very pessimistic. If you ask a young person, super pessimistic about where the world is going. If you ask people about what they think is meaningful in their life, that number's they have a lot less meaning in their life. They don't know what the meaning of life is. There's no answer. There's no commonly held point of solidarity in the Western world or the world at large anymore. What that means is that people willing to offer it, people willing to go to them and embody it, people willing to be missionary disciples in that context are going to be very fruitful, because we're not having to evangelize to old school paganism where they have a God, they have a narrative of life, they have an empire, they have a story. We're going to people with no story, no heritage, no context, no hope, and no optimism. And we're bringing them the gospel, which is literally, hey, I know everything seems like death, but guess what? What if by the very nature of something dying, that could be the resurrection? What if by Christ being crucified and resurrecting, that could be the very thing that turns death and the world and the devil on its head? We're entering into what the popes call the culture of death. It is everywhere. The culture of death is everywhere. And in almost every way you could think of. And if we're going to bring them the gospel and they have no other competing religious interest, no other competing structure of meaning, no other point of solidarity, and no other means of hope, I bet we will be surprised to see how fruitful that is. And if we have all of these priests, like this study that I brought up is showing us, if the people leading us into that are these people who are theologically orthodox or very orthodox, well, brothers and sisters, we are going to have a good time. And I'm not saying that that's going to translate into like, oh, everyone becomes Catholic. It might not. The church probably still will be smaller, I think. I think that that's probably true. But the people who do convert, they're not just going to be cultural Catholics. They're not just going to be there because grandma told them they should be or because they think it's nice or there's a sense of community. They're going to be there because they're willing to die for it. And that is no small thing. I have a sense that the walls Satan has built are going to fall easily, not in terms of there being no suffering, but the people's republic of Satan crumbling faster than we can imagine. Evil is brittle, and it has never been more brittle. Yeah, I think so. There's kind of this thing, David, that I've noticed about evil and about the demonic and just about evil and bad guys in general. Just look at any good story. Right when they think they're about to win is when they boast, and it's when they show their hand, it's when they overextend, and that provides the very weak point by which they get politely undone. If you just examine it and then look at our world, it seems crazy to everybody. It seems like evil is pervasive to everybody. It seems like they're about to enact their grand master plan, and there's all this hermeneutic of suspicion around that. And frankly, it doesn't even seem like that much of a stretch sometimes to be like, man, there's all these evil plans coming to fruition all at once. That is usually what evil does when it thinks it's about to win. It overextends itself, it shows its hand, and then than this. Evil is brittle and has never been more brittle. So all that to say, this report and the state of the church actually gives me optimism. And that's kind of weird to say in a time when most people are freaking out for a lot of reasons, some of which are good reasons. But the church of tomorrow, yeah, that's going to be a force to be reckoned with. So I can't wait to be a part of it. I can't wait for y'all to be a part of it with me. And what does that mean for us? That means exactly what I've been saying, and I'm going to keep saying it on repeat. This is the time to press in. This is the time to say, okay, decree on the apostolate of the laity. I got to figure out how to get involved in that. There's a lot of really good one-liners in there and a lot of really good paragraphs, just a lot of good stuff. You should go read it. I think I'm going to do an episode on it. Might have to see if Dom from the Logos Project wants to do that, because I think he'd be a cool guy to talk about with that document. But guys, this is not the time to just dig yourself in a hole and get the sacraments and go home. First off, if that's all we're going to do, then what are we doing? The whole point of all of this is that Jesus says, go. In the same way that the Father has sent me, I'm sending you. He says that to the apostles, and the apostles tell us, go. You guys are going to do the work of ministry. St. Paul says in Ephesians 4 that God has given us the teachers, the apostles, the presbyters, all of them, to build up the saints so that we can go do the work of ministry. That's our job. So yes, is it tough when you have a priest who's not great? It is tough. This is telling us that the opposite is coming. Really good priests who know that what the church needs is good men. And they are doing what they need to become those good men. What that means for us is that it's time for us to become good lay apostles, to be activated, to not just get fat on the sacraments and do nothing with all of that grace, to become missionaries in our own contexts. And I know that that's scary, and I know that that's hard. And what's weird is I think like a lot of times people get stuck on like, how do I do that? I need all sorts of training to do that. You really just need to be a good, faithful Catholic, spend a little time studying, and then a lot of time learning how to listen to the Holy Spirit, and a lot of time learning how to build relationships, build trust. And honestly, this is going to sound really cliche and cute, but fall in love with the people around you. Because if you don't love them, if you don't actually want to be involved in their lives and be their friends and take an interest in them, then they won't really care what you say about the gospel, and they won't really want to take your advice on the deepest questions of life. But if they get the sense that you care for them more than most people do, which in a day when most people are isolated and alone isn't hard to do, if you can do that, then you'll accidentally walk yourself into being someone's sponsor at confirmation when an agnostic person comes into full communion with the Catholic Church. And if you think I'm wrong, go try it. And then let me know in the comments how it goes 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. That's where we're going. Really good priests and an activated missionary laity, people who are willing to live for the faith and die for it. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited to live it. Can't wait to live it with all you guys. But before I keep rambling over and over, I'm going to go ahead and land this plane. So make sure, if you thought this was valuable, super off the cuff, I know, now it's 40 minutes. That's crazy. How do I even do that? Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Helps us get out there, spread the word. We have some cool shows coming up, actually with some really good priests. So that'll be fun. And also, guys, make sure you go over to drewthecatholic.locals.com. When I get a chance, I post cool articles. Just put one up about my experience with the Emergent Church and Rob Bell and how that's sort of a metaphor for culture at large, especially in our experience of Christianity. So you can go read that for free, sign up for free, and join the conversation, which I keep saying, and no one is conversing. So like if you're in the locals, you can go like post. Let me know what you're thinking about my content or the church or whatever, and come hang out with me. We had said in Richard's episode that we're going to do a Zoom call hangout soon so that David can get on Zoom with us and all of you can get on Zoom with us. So head over to drewthecatholic.locals.com. And yeah, that's all I got for you guys. I will see you next time.